Okay, so look, we might kick things off. I'd imagine that there's going to be people joining over the next few minutes, but that's okay. So hello and welcome to everyone so far to our webinar this morning. Beyond boundaries, contractors, visas, and you. So I'd like to thank everyone who's taken the time out to join us. I'll start maybe with just a little bit about myself. My name is Sinead Canning, and I've worked in recruitment and with Engage People specifically now for it's coming up to 7 years, and I manage our accountancy division here. I'm delighted to be hosting the webinar this morning on such a timely topic after many conversations, I would say, with our clients about hiring in the current market. So I'm going to leave plenty of time at the end to ask questions. And so the chat box function will be enabled just for anyone, maybe in the last kind of 15 or 10 minutes to ask questions to the panel. And if you miss anything, don't worry. We'll have a recording on our website shortly for anyone to download or share with colleagues. So now on to the exciting part. I'm very privileged to be joined by such an esteemed panel who will each be sharing their expertise with us this morning. So today I'll start with Catherine Kennedy, the Apprenticeship Manager at ATU, Atlantic Technological University. Catherine, you might tell us a little bit about yourself?
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Catherine Kennedy. I'm the Apprenticeship Manager with responsibility for the Insurance Practice Apprenticeship in ATU Sligo. Formerly, we would have been IT Sligo. Many of you may have known us as that, and we're now partnered with Letterkenny IT and GMIT to form ATU. I'm working on the insurance apprenticeship now 5 years. I'm in ATU over 20 years, far too long. Our apprenticeship, I'll be talking about it later anyway, has gone from strength to strength, and it's really successful.
Brilliant. Thanks, Catherine. And next we have Blathnaid Evans, Partner and Head of Employment and Corporate Immigration with Ogier Leman Solicitors. Thanks for joining us this morning, Blathnaid.
Thanks, Sinead, and thanks everyone for joining this webinar this morning. So my name's Blathnaid Evans. I'm a partner in Ogier Leman. We were Leman up until March of last year when we merged with Ogier. I've been with the firm just over 5 years now. And I have just over 12 years experience in employment and corporate immigration.
Thanks, Blathnaid. And last but not least, David O'Reilly, owner and director of tax with Fenero. Thanks very much for joining us, David.
Thank you very much, Sinead. Very kind of joyful to be here today. My background is I'm an accountant and tax consultant by trade. And Fenero, we assist professional contractors be compliant and really maximise the benefits that professional contracting has to offer. So we've been doing that around 14 years now, and we've helped tens of thousands of contractors over those years.
Fantastic, thanks. Okay, so look, I might kick off with just some general questions that I'll put to the panel, so feel free, anyone, to jump in and answer. What advice maybe would you give to employers hiring in today's market? Anyone like to kick off? Dave, you're about to say? Yeah, go for it there.
For myself, it's really the employer branding and get that right. And for contractors, it's the hiring client branding. What contractors, they like people, they want similar items than employees, kind of good rewards, balance, inclusion. So it's kind of getting that branding correct and then living the brand promises. For me, it's doing the basics right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that we ourselves have put a major focus on as well here at Engage People, is the branding over the last kind of year or two. And Blathnaid, would you have any insights into this area?
Yeah, I suppose what I'm sort of seeing a good trend in at the moment is, it's not just about the sort of the salary anymore, really. It's about the benefits, and it's about what you can do that makes you a bit different. And even that sort of benefit shopping has become a real trend now. Particularly with the sort of the younger generation of people that are coming through, and I find that can really make clients, like employers, stand out. So that's what I see a lot of that now, and just sort of seeing about how to make that different. And it sort of feeds into what David is saying, having all of that sort of in place And then when you are sort of going to market, it makes you a much more attractive employer and to stand out, because, just to say that you might pay a good salary isn't really the sort of, it's not the be all and end all anymore.
Absolutely. And I think then with emerging trends such as the likes of remote work or hybrid working, you've, the different technology advancements as well. They're maybe shaping how companies hire. How can organizations, do you think, leverage these trends to successfully widen their talent pool?
I'll jump in. Yeah. I mean, I think like the remote working piece is crucial now. I mean, like obviously certain jobs don't lend to remote working, and, that is what it is. But, where it can be done, and, to be able to show that flexibility, is really attractive. So again, it's about sort of thinking about how that works. The employment lawyer in me is, you have to sort of think of, it's great to have remote working, but you need to make sure that you've done the health and safety checks, that you've got the workstation and you've put all of those risks aside. Another piece which is sort of feeding into this remote working, what you're seeing more and more of, and we actually even do it in our own firm, is allowing the employee to work abroad for X amount of weeks, per year. Like that's really attractive with a family.
Yeah.
You can go abroad and, you might work sort of on and off for 2 weeks and then have a 2 weeks holiday, get an Airbnb. It is a real, it is a game changer, that. So that's certainly that I think there's a big trend on. And again, that's an easy win to be able to say that you can do that with the right measures and perimeters in place.
And Catherine, so we ourselves here actually have a recruitment apprentice. Her name is Rebecca, and she's now entering into her final year. So she will soon have a level 8 degree in recruitment, as well as 3 years work experience behind her. It's been, a fantastic experience for her, for ourselves, and it's actually the first of its kind in recruitment. I'd love to learn a little bit more about the insurance apprenticeship program that you oversee, if you'd like to tell us.
Yeah, so it's quite similar to the recruitment one. The insurance practice apprenticeship is also level 8. It was the first level 8 degree apprenticeship in the sector. We started in 2016, and it was actually industry led. So a large insurer came to the Insurance Institute and said they were really struggling to get people, and what can we do? So it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is just thinking outside the box and looking at new avenues. And they, said, could we do an apprenticeship? So it was basically born from that idea, and they partnered with us in IT Sligo at the time, because we would have been very much advanced in online learning, and because we wanted the apprenticeship to be nationwide. So we have apprentices from the top of Donegal down to Cork, obviously a large number in Dublin, and so it is a nationwide program, and anyone can join. There's 2 streams to it, so it's the general insurance stream or the financial advisor life stream. The benefits to the employer are huge. So you bring somebody in, it's a 3-year commitment. Our apprentices don't tend to leave, because obviously the employer has invested the kind of time and money and effort into them, and they see the 3-year journey with them. At the end of year 1, they're APA qualified. At the end of year 2, they're QFA or CIP qualified. So straight away they've got that, advantage of having the industry exams under the belt. What they're learning in the classroom, they're bringing into the job, and so it's all very, very relevant. It's grown from strength to strength year on year. Our numbers have grown, bar the COVID year, which it's like all employers, they struggle to understand how they would be able to onboard new staff. So our numbers dipped. This year we're on target to have the highest number ever. We're looking at between 120 and 130 first years, which is fantastic. From the employer's point of view, I think the success, it's just evident in the employers come back year on year and take more apprentices and come back. So that shows. We surveyed them just nearly 2 years ago, as we were preparing to revalidate the program, just to get some feedback, and the feedback was fantastic from employers that they then some of that we asked them, did the apprenticeship achieve the outcomes anticipated by the organisation? 88% said yes. And we asked them, did they see an alignment between what apprentices are taught on the programme and what is required in their job? 97% said yes. So I think it's evident that the employers, because they come back year on year, which is fantastic, and take on more apprentices. For a talent pool and widening your talent pool, it is a great avenue, because our apprentices come from all walks of life. And the demographic would be The age demographic is 18 to 45. We have career changers, back to work parents. We have people who have got a degree already, but no career out of it, or just didn't like what they were doing, and they're coming back as looking for a new profession. We've school leavers, and we've people who maybe just didn't know what they wanted to do, took a year out or did a FETAC course, and now want to get the level 8 honours degree and also kind of want to have a career. So it's been a huge success to date.
Fantastic. And the results there that you mentioned kind of speak for themselves. How would you say, though, that a student graduating from the apprenticeship program might differ from a student graduating from a traditional CAO honours degree?
There's no comparison, to be honest. They're absolutely, if you think about it, and I'll give you a very relevant example at the end. So our apprentice starts on day one. They're working on the job. They work 4 days a week with the employer, and they take online classes 1 day a week. So they're working in the workplace. They're getting to know customers. They're developing a relationship with their colleagues. They're developing a network within the industry. They're taking their insurance exams, so they have those done. So at the end of year one, they've got a year's work experience behind them. They've got their APA qualification. Whereas if you're in a traditional CAO degree, you're just working, and you're probably in the summer working in a restaurant or retail to pay the bills. So they've got that tangible experience in the insurance industry. We had an example a couple of years ago whereby one of our first years, and he hadn't finished his summer semester, so he wasn't APA qualified yet, but in the June, the company brought in a graduate from UL. So there's an insurance degree in UL. So this graduate had his degree, but no experience in the business. And he came in, and our apprentice, a year one apprentice, was training him in and had more knowledge after doing 1 year of the program. So it's just that on the job learning that they get, and the modules they do tie in with what they're doing in the workplace, which makes it all very, very relevant. So there is no experience. At the end of 3 years, the graduates have been working for 3 years. They usually are due ready for promotion because they've been doing well in the business. They've got 3 years work experience, and they have their degree. So it's all of that to put together is what makes the difference to a traditional graduate coming out of the CAO system with a degree.
Great, thanks very much for that, Catherine. And David, if I turn to you, so if it's, I suppose, widening the talent pool. It's a big theme for many companies and organizations. I suppose, people contracting, it's nothing new. However, there are still a lot of companies out there that maybe mightn't be familiar with the process. Could you maybe talk us through what the key differences are between a contractor and an employee?
Sure. For me, the taxman in me starts with the contract. So an employee is governed by employment contract or contract of service. Typically, there's no end date on that, and that relationship is governed by a whole array of employment legislations. You have redundancy, minimum notice, kind of working hours. Whereas contractors, they don't get an employment contract, so they get what's called a contract for service. Has a start date, an end date. It stipulates the rate of pay, and it also says kind of the obligations of each party. So they're not governed by the same employment legislation that employees have. Typically, it's shorter term, and for employees, they have the limited kind of flexibility in terms of kind of their remuneration package. Get a gross salary each year, kind of maybe get pension on top. Whereas contractors, they have more flexibility. They get paid a daily rate, and they only get paid for the days they work. So if you don't work a day, you don't get paid. But then they have more flexibility on how they draw that down. They have more tax planning opportunities, either kind of in terms of pensions or building of funds for taking out of a company at a later stage. What we're seeing kind of definitely kind of after COVID, just where the contractors are coming from. Like before, kind of a lot of the Irish clients, they would like to see the contractor sitting at a desk carrying out the work. COVID happened, and we've seen kind of a flurry of clients taking on contractors fully remote. So working from Poland, Europe, even outside of Europe, and they never come to Ireland. So in terms of broadening talent pool, talent is mobile, and we've seen a lot of the contractors who would typically have come to Ireland. They're staying in their local kind of jurisdiction. They're getting paid Irish daily rates, which are pretty decent compared to some countries. So they're happy out kind of fully remote working from abroad.
Yeah, great, thanks. And that actually nicely leads me into a question I had for you, Blathnaid. In terms of like, so if we keep with the legislation piece, and hiring non-Irish nationals or people from outside the EU who have different kind of work visas, first of all, it might be helpful for you to explain the different types to us, if that's okay, and we can go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose there is a number of employment permit options, but there's three which would probably be the most common. The first one is the critical skills employment permit, which used to be known as the green card. Okay, so take from that what you will, but that's sort of the golden standard. And that is really sort of focused at sort of the the very sort of highly skilled workers that come in. The main benefits of the critical skills is it allows for automatic family reunification. Okay, and it's much easier for the spouse or the de facto partner of that person to come in and get an employment permit. Equally, that type of permit is always for 2 years. And if after the end of that 2 years, everything remains the same, that person should be able to apply for what's called a stamp 4, which is akin to permanent residency in Ireland. And then they just have to renew that card each year, and ultimately then they can apply for their passport. So it's a much easier transition period. There isn't then the same sort of continuous cost for the employer. Once they get the stamp 4, you don't have to keep applying for a new employment permit. Then after that, then you have the intercompany transfer permit, which is basically when somebody is being seconded essentially to Ireland. So they have to be employed by the foreign company, and they must be linked for at least 6 months prior to that. And for that permit, it can be from initially anything from 6 months to 2 years, and then the cumulative is 5 years. With that type of permit, the person remains on the payroll of the foreign company. But depending on their length of time here, there is a tax liability, and that all has to be sort of taken into consideration and sorted out. And then the third one is called the general employment permit, which is a bit of a sort of catch-all when you don't sort of necessarily fall into those two. It's a bit like the ICT in that the first time can be anything from 6 months to 2 years, and then it can be extended to a cumulative of 5 years. At the end of the 5 years with the general employment permit, a person can potentially apply for the stamp 4, like you could have after the 2 years with the critical skills. The point to sort of remember with all of them, well, actually sort of bar the ICT one, there's a couple of pieces that employers always need to be aware of. One, you need to be registered with the Irish Revenue in Ireland to apply for an employment permit. You do need to have a company set up here as well as part of that. And the thirdly, which doesn't apply for the ICT, is this 50-50 rule, which is in place. So that is 50% of your workforce must be EA nationals. Now that rule can be waived in the first 2 years. The first 2 years, and that 2-year time period starts on the date that they register with Irish Revenue, if you can get support from the IDA. So again, one of the first things I always say to clients when I'm talking to them, especially if they're an FDI type client, speak with the IDA, get registered with them. Even if you don't go down this route, they're a brilliant contact to have and a brilliant support. And get registered with the Irish Revenue. Those are the sort of pieces that can take a bit of time and sort of get people a bit caught up.
Okay. And do you think there's been a rise in employers here hiring people on visas over the last maybe 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, I think there has been actually. And I think that's a sort of a combination of factors.
Yeah.
Certainly COVID has sort of opened up the sort of the movement, I think, of people, sort of in different jurisdictions. The second is Brexit. It's definitely had an impact for us for sure. Because part of that is, well, Ireland has just become a more attractive country sort of in the wake of Brexit, but equally England's immigration rules have got tighter. And from my understanding of speaking with colleagues in the UK, it's become more costly. Even the government fees that sort of come with that. I think by and large our sort of the types of permits are quite similar. But definitely in terms of the fees that we sort of incur here are less. And then the other, which has been sort of a big change, has been the government initiative to hire more people to work for the department. I mean, coming out of COVID there, like you could be talking sort of 4 to 6 months to get an employment permit. Like it was crazy and a real deterrent. Whereas I just looked up at the moment, employment permits are being processed that were submitted on the 2nd and 3rd of August. So you've got about a 3-week turnaround now. So by and large, what I would say to companies, once you have those sort of the homework pieces that I talked about in place, you know, it probably takes you about 1 to 2 weeks to get all the application ready. So like you could have it all sorted within about 4 to 5 weeks, which is very fast, you know, and it does make it quite attractive, because if you're going to a candidate and saying this is going to take 6 months, you know, to even get the employment permit, like that's a very unnerving time for someone who's potentially looking at relocating to Ireland. Whereas if you're saying we could probably have an answer in this in a month, you know, that's a much more sort of doable and adjustable, you know, time frame for someone when they are looking at relocating.
Absolutely. And what are the benefits, do you think, then, to looking internationally when hiring?
It's a bigger pool. You know, there's no doubt about it. Like that has to be the number one. You know, and I suppose the ICT permit is a very attractive. That again happens a lot with the FDI clients that are coming in, because generally, you know, if you're located in America or wherever it might be and you're setting up in Ireland, you have people, you know, in that country, you know, who already work for the business, that know the business, know the culture of the business, know what you're trying to achieve. And that's really important, to have that person in Ireland, you know, to try and continue that. Because, you know, sometimes with companies, when they set up in, you know, not just Ireland, in any jurisdiction, if you don't have the connection to the sort of the mothership, so to speak, you can quite easily lose the culture and lose what it is that you're trying to achieve. So all of that is really, really important to clients, is to keep that continuity and consistency, and to know that they can do it with relative ease is great.
And David, then from your perspective, in your line of business, it's something you might have come across maybe as well, as seeing a rise in kind of companies hiring in you know, with people on visas. Has that been the case for you, or something you've come across?
Definitely, we would get a lot of inquiries from candidates on particular types of visas, and also from hiring clients asking, can we hire these contractors on these visas? So the critical skills you can't hire, you can't take them on as a contractor, but then the stamp 4, as kind of Blathnaid says, that's the holy grail. So they can go for kind of whichever option they want through contracting. So yeah, we've seen a massive increase. Also kind of on stamp 2Gs or 1G, where kind of the spouse of the critical skills will come in, and they'd be taking on contracting roles. So that change, like it came in last year, I believe, was great in terms of just opened up the talent pool. You have a spouse that'd be on the critical skills, and then kind of the partner could work as well.
And then for companies who aren't familiar with hiring contractors, David, right? Could you describe a scenario where contractors played, let's say, a pivotal role in driving, you know, whether it was an innovative project forward or whatever the case may be? Just, you know, a real life example for us might be helpful.
Sure. From our perspective, and even with Fenero kind of, we hire contractors from time to time, and what we're looking for is impact. Like, you're hiring these kind of highly skilled, and they receive a decent daily rate as well. So you're looking for impact, and kind of just even with the cost. Typically they get paid a higher daily rate, but then when you're looking at kind of the overall cost, like they don't receive payment for holidays, annual leave, bank holidays, employers PSI. So when you take all of those costs kind of off, the price comparison, there's not generally much between them. From our angle, we specialize in assisting the actual professional contractors. So we don't deal with the end clients on a daily basis, but we do speak with the contractors. And from a kind of an innovative perspective, I can speak personally from Fenero. So we've set up a couple of divisions, and we've hired contractors to be very experienced, really kind of more experienced than what we would require. We get them in, they would set up the systems, the procedures, and then we would backfill after that and maybe keep them on maybe 1 or 2 days a month just from a consultancy perspective. So we find it's great for getting something off the ground quickly, getting it kind of up to a certain level, and then we backfill where kind of the need requires, because we'll need a continuous person in that role.
And Catherine, if you were to give some advice maybe to hiring managers who are with us now this morning, who have maybe thought about looking at, apprentices to hire as a viable kind of talent pool, is there anything they need to know, or who could they go to get some advice?
Yeah, I would definitely encourage them to look into it. It's going to widen their pool if they haven't already thought about this. One, for new recruits, it's a great way of bringing new people in. And our employers tell us time and time again, it brings new vibrancy in. The apprentices are bringing a different perspective. They may be coming from retail and they've got lots of customer service experience. They're usually bringing in a new energy in that. But also to consider about retaining your existing employees. So a lot of our employers do offer it out to existing employees. And again, it's just that 3-year thing, because if they sign up to the 3-year degree, they tend to stay for the 3 years. So it's a good way of retaining your existing employees. And I suppose going back to what Blathnaid said, it's also just offering them more than just the salary. So you're offering them a level 8 degree, you're offering them a chance to progress their education where maybe they didn't have that. So to obviously, yes, it widens the pool externally, but also to look internally. And the biggest advice I can give is get ahead of the curve. So obviously we're about to kick off the new year now in September. Recruitment is pretty much closed, but don't be waiting until next August to start thinking about this again. Start thinking in January. What we advise all of our employers is to hire early, take them on a fixed term contract, start recruitment in January, February, and take them on kind of March, April. Because what that does, it's twofold really. It settles them in the business, and it gets them used to the office environment and the basics of what they need before September kicks in and they take on the academic journey. And also, if it doesn't work out and insurance isn't for them, the apprentice may leave before we even start. So it gives the employer a chance to take on somebody else to join the program. So definitely recruit early. Without that would be one of my key takeaways from today. And thankfully, apprenticeships are becoming more and more widely accepted in Ireland. Unfortunately, there was this, you talk about apprenticeships, you talked about plumbers, carpentry and joining, the typical craft apprenticeships. But there's a great rhetoric now around apprenticeships, and the government are hugely supporting them, and you're going to see more and more of them. So it is a good time to, and people are looking at it as an alternative to VO or other college routes. And then the other thing, to be honest, is we see it time and time again in ATU is that lots of young people and people who want to go back and study maybe and further their education just can't afford it because of the cost of living crisis. And we've had many students who got offered places last year, and this was all over the country, not just in Sligo, Galway or Letterkenny, and just couldn't A, get accommodation, or B, afford it. So the apprenticeship route it's getting them their college degree, getting them 3 years of experience in the business, and provide a new opening into whatever field it may be. For insurance in particular, lots of people don't think of insurance as a career. Like, we've lots of business students, but they think business, and you'd say to them, what about insurance? Oh, I never thought of that. So it's a great opening for insurance companies of getting new talent in, but also there's other types of apprenticeships as well that we've accounting within Ireland, we've accounting technicians, apprenticeship, and there's financial services. So it's definitely a great route to consider.
And Blathnaid, maybe I'll pose the same question to you. So let's say I'm a hiring manager, and I've no idea where to start in terms of what I can do and cannot do when hiring people who are on work visas. Where should I go first, or what's my first port of call?
It's a very loaded question. Yeah, I mean, I suppose the first piece, like, if you're, when you're looking at like the pool and trying to recruit, like, sometimes it doesn't always come up that you're going to need an employment permit, right? Like, I suppose that is the first point of call, and that would be pretty standard. And I think sometimes you would see employers get a little bit panicked then when they're like, oh, right, okay, this person doesn't have an EU passport, where do I go from here? So, and like, I can sort of bottom that point out, right, with a couple of sort of, questions once I know, what's the person's nationality. Because the other point actually to remember is depending on the country that that person is from, you might also need a visa as well as a work permit, which can delay the process. So, you know, again, it's about knowing this. It's about knowing the job, you know, and knowing what the overall package is going to be as part of that. And then it's just trying to see, can you sort of put them into one of the sort of the different groups? Like the way the employment permit scheme is defined in Ireland is, you know, if we have a surplus of that particular type of work, we don't, you know, you can't get an employment permit. For example, there's far too many lawyers in this country. We can never get an employment permit. That's just the way it works. But like, for example, engineers, you know, we can't get enough of them in the country, you know, and they are, you know, quite easily, you will get them within it. The government is doing more. We are sort of looking at new legislation coming in. For example, subcontractors, you can't get an employment permit for at the moment, which is a real gap in the market here. That will make a big change for companies. Equally, the sort of employer on record model, that doesn't work for employment permits. So, yeah, it's just about asking the right questions. You know, what is the salary? What is the job? Where does it come in? But I think one piece to get out there, which is a bit of a misconception in Ireland. So as I understand it, in America, when you get an employment permit for someone, you effectively sponsor that person, and there becomes extra responsibilities and liabilities. And I think that's a concern. You know, I would get that client to be like, okay, but what's our responsibility to that person as the employer? And it doesn't work like that here. So you get an employment permit for that person, and that's it, right? There's no sort of financial responsibility or anything if that kicks in. If that person doesn't work out for whatever reason, performance, misconduct, etc., you just let them go in line with the employment legislation. Yes, their employment permit is cancelled. So, you know, if you balance it up, is that person more likely to bring an employment claim because, you know, their permit is cancelled? Potentially, but it's not that the employer would be fined or, you know, becomes financially responsible for that person in the country.
Right, okay. Very interesting. And David, maybe just on that piece, and, you know, Blathnaid mentioned some misconceptions there when hiring people on visas. Are there any that you come across when you're speaking to companies or contractors, you know, for companies who are thinking about hiring fixed term or daily rate contractors? And what is it maybe that they need to know before hiring them?
Sure. For me, kind of all starts with matching the role with the talent. So make sure you're hiring appropriately. Like if it's short-term nature or specialized work compared to routine. A lot of roles kind of lend themselves to permanent employees compared to contingent workers. And then once kind of you've matched that, it's making sure you have the compliance correct. So you're hiring kind of a contingent worker. In Ireland, it's common for them to operate through a limited company, so not a sole trader, and that's really to give extra protection to the client. You want to make sure that they have the appropriate insurance in place and that they're paying their taxes. So kind of you're not processing these taxes; you're just paying an invoice, and you make sure that the contractor is paying their taxes, and this can be done by asking for a tax clearance certificate or a letter from their accountants stating that all their tax affairs are up to date, and that they're paying the taxes in the country where they're carrying out the work. So if you're engaging a contractor who's resident outside of Ireland or operating through a non-Irish company, you want to make sure that they're paying the taxes in their jurisdiction and that there's going to be no comeback for the hiring client. And I know some clients will look at kind of outsourcing that to a recruitment agency like Engage People, where they'll manage the talent and then kind of make sure that everything's compliant. And then for me, after that, it's really like talent is mobile, and particularly kind of contractors. So it's making sure that you understand what they want. Okay, you're going to give them a daily rate, but what do they actually want? We do a survey. We survey contractors every year, and what they want from the hiring client and what they want from the next contract can really be categorized into 4 categories. They want decent pay, they want security, and kind of security is kind of security over their income stream. So they want to know kind of where their money's coming from for the next 6 months, 12 months. So communication is key. So if you know that, okay, you have a bank of work for 18 months, but you're only going to give out 6-month contracts, let them know, okay, kind of we're doing 6-month contracts, but there's 18 months work here, so they know, okay, if I do my part and you do your part, I'm going to be here for the next 18 months. We're also seeing kind of they want flexibility. That's always been the nature with contractors. We're seeing a lot of contracts coming out with non-standard working hours. Like remote working, that's a given for
Yeah.
a lot of roles. They want that, but the non-standard working hours kind of is something that kind of we've seen over the last year. And then the fourth category was experience. Like everybody wants to develop their skills and knowledge in a role, and contractors are the same. The expectation on them coming in is hard. They're expected to hit the ground running, but communicate with them, kind of find out what do they want to achieve from the role, from that, and you've more chance of retaining them, and then kind of increasing kind of the branding for the company as well. That's they're walking away. Okay, I'm satisfied. I got what I want. Kind of, I did what you guys want, so everyone's happy.
Yeah. Okay. And so you mentioned communication there has been a key piece.
Mhm.
Is there anything else that companies or hiring managers could do, to, I suppose, position themselves as a very attractive option for contracting staff, while addressing concerns maybe related to job security and benefits?
Yeah. Again, through the survey, it comes overwhelmingly they don't receive feedback. So
Okay.
like there's no kind of annual performance review where kind of sit down and be getting feedback. Contractors, they're crying out for feedback is what they say in our survey, and they're not receiving it. And that plays a massive role then again tying into their sense of security. Am I doing well? Am I not doing well? So I think kind of organizations should structure regular feedback into their contingent workers so that they know kind of they're doing a good job or they're kind of maybe not doing a so good job. But that's the one thing that really kind of stood out from the data we seen from the survey. They're not getting feedback.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. So I might just remind people, if they have any specific questions, they can pop them into the chat box there, and we'll get going with some questions from our attendees then for the panel in the next few minutes. Catherine, I might turn to you. What's next for the apprenticeship program? Where do you see it going maybe in the next 5 to 10 years?
For the insurance one in particular, we're just continuing to grow it and maintain the quality I suppose we have. We would like to look down the line at maybe a level 9, so that the graduates from the level 8 could look to continue and further their qualifications. And really, it's just, to be honest, keep doing what we're doing, Sinead, because it's been doing really well. We're always looking to kind of create awareness about it. So in particular, the insurance one, but all apprenticeships, so that, because as I say, there is that traditional thought of thinking, that way of thinking that it's just to do with the traditional craft apprenticeships. So it's really about growing it and keeping it going. And retention, we do lose. Our key concern is that our retention rate from first to second year it needs improvement. Some of the apprentices just join and they don't realise what they're taking on. So we spent a lot of time with our employers explaining them, for their interview process, to be very clear to the apprentices when they're interviewing that, you're going to be working, you're going to be studying, and obviously you've got a life. So it's very important for employers to be very clear with the candidates when they're interviewing them what they're taking on. Typically an apprentice during the semester needs to be putting 6 to 8 hours a week aside, additional time for study. So yes, they're on a lecture day, but they're not going to get everything done in that day. So if they want to be passing their exams. So that sometimes happens. So it's how we can, I suppose, help our apprentices help our employers understand that, and at the hiring point, and then help our apprentices get through that. So time management, we do a lot with them about time management and things like that. Now, to be honest, sometimes it's not all a bad scenario, in that you may have an apprentice who just struggles on the academic side and can't do it, but loves the job, loves dealing with customers, and ends up staying with the company and ends up just doing the insurance exams and getting their QFA or their CIP qualification. So that's it's a good result. In the end, they've found a career that they're very happy with. The employer has found an employee they're very happy with. So I suppose it's just making sure our retention rates kind of improve a little. So that's our main concern moving forward.
Okay, thanks. Look, I'm conscious slightly of time, and I'd love to hear a few questions from our attendees today. So I'm going to open the floor to any questions. Just make sure you're popping them into the Q&A box there, folks. And I will put the questions to the panel. So, okay, we're starting off with our very own Keith Grant here. So he asked, we see employers sometimes saying that they'll only look at a stamp for visa and a stamp 1G won't be considered. Blathnaid, I'm presuming this one might be for you now, but why would this be, and what are the risks for employers to take on a stamp 1G employee?
Well, actually, so
or are there any?
Yeah, well, there's two types of stamp 1G. So there's the one that David mentioned earlier, which is when you're the spouse or de facto partner of someone who holds a critical skills employment permit, right? And if that's the case, like, that's quite straightforward. Now, the only thing an employer has to be aware of, they can only work for it's the duration of the partner or the husband or the wife's critical skills employment permit. So if they come in and they've only a year left, they've a year to work. But equally, once they renew that and the person gets a stamp 4, then that can continue. So there just is a few pieces of the puzzle that you just have to check to make sure that the person they're here with is valid in the country. So that's quite straightforward. Then the other type is a person who has undergone a degree in Ireland, right? Straight after it. And this is actually a really useful recruitment tool for employers. So once they come out of university, they get they can get a stamp 1G. So it's the next stamp that they get, and they're allowed to work for any employer full time. There's actually no conditions around that employment, which is brilliant. So I would see a lot of clients hiring people, and it's nearly like the probationary period in a sense, to sort of see, are they going to work out, and you'll know within 6 months, is it going to work out? And, once you get to that sort of stage, then you can look at applying for the employment permit. But you're doing it in the comfort of knowing that this person is a good fit for the organisation, they're a good worker, etc. So the stamp one is actually really good, right? But again, it depends where they are in the stamp 1G. Someone comes to you and there's only sort of a couple of months left of the stamp 1G visa, then you really need to just look at the employment permit option. But if they're sort of coming at the start of that, or even with 9 months or whatever, it's it's a great tool. I think it's brilliant. The stamp 4 is obviously, as it's the golden sort of option, right? And that's great as long as that person just keeps up renewing that every year. Then there's no issues around that. So Bobby, actually, one other point that sometimes comes up when I get a question about it is, if a person's already on an employment permit with a separate employer and they're sort of looking to change job, the employment permit is not transferable, right? That's very important. The person has to apply for a new employment permit, and depending on where they are in that journey of the employment permit, it may not be that easy. For example, if it's in the first year and that person is leaving of their own decision, it's not, they're quite sort of reluctant to give an employment permit in that instance. But if that person has been made redundant, for example, then it's, it's a different story. So, they're just the few factors. But certainly I wouldn't rule out a 1G. I think it's a great stamp and it's a really good recruitment tool.
Yeah, that's great. That's going to be very helpful for a lot of hiring managers. And David, this one's for you from Ellie. Are there any patterns you see emerging in regards rising popularity in certain sectors for hiring contractors rather than FTs?
Yeah, in terms of sectors, IT and tech has always been strong from a contracting perspective. It was just the nature of that industry. Very kind of project-based work where they're building kind of platforms and so forth. It lends itself to contractors very well. Over the last number of years, though, life science and pharma, we've seen kind of a massive increase in that. Again, kind of quite project-based work. Finance has started kind of maybe 6 years ago. We have a lot of accountants and finance professionals kind of coming on stream, even finance directors. So we see kind of finance probably makes up around 12% of our contractor base now, whereas 10 years ago it was 1%. For finance professionals, kind of definitely kind of coming in strong. But kind of looking at the data, and we do this kind of on a regular basis. Historically it was 35s to maybe kind of 50, kind of in terms of age. That's kind of that spread has got a lot bigger. We're seeing kind of people kind of coming out of college and going contracting, and a massive increase in people coming out of retirement and going contracting to 2 days, 3 days a week. Like, they've a wealth of experience, wealth of knowledge. So they're coming back and they're taking the 3-month contracts, and they're happy out working the 3 days a week, and they're getting paid kind of decent, but then kind of sharing or unloading that knowledge into the client organization. So kind of in terms of trends, probably kind of people kind of more mature than previously. Kind of definitely kind of that's our biggest cohort, kind of in terms of increase in size.
Okay, great. And this one's maybe a little bit more focused on someone who's searching for a role. From Linda. Blathnaid, again, I'd say this one's for you. Would you say that it's challenging for a person holding a Stamp 1G to find a job opportunity, considering the actual job market, or what would your thoughts be?
I think it's more sort of understanding of it. I mean, I think some people just get nervous.
Yeah.
When they see someone, is on some sort of immigration permission and they don't really understand the system. So sometimes employers, just sort of say, no, I don't understand that, that seems expensive. But for those who are sort of willing to explore it and sort of, ask the right questions, it is really useful. But I think it's just more education of it and just getting people to be aware of it. And because the system has got better, it has improved for sure.
We'd actually see quite a lot of contractors coming on board with Stamp 1Gs. We'd have a couple of hundred individuals kind of on our books on Stamp 1G. So it's definitely kind of, it lends itself to contracting as well.
Yeah. And I think the point with that you raised with the partner or the spouse, before you used to have to apply for the employment permit. That used to be the system, whereas now they've changed that. Once you've got the Stamp 1G, then it's become even easier, which as you said, David, then has just made it way more attractive.
Yeah.
Great. And a question here from Michael. So some of our clients are interested in taking on contractors, potentially converting to permanent down the line. What do they need to do to get this off the ground for the first time? Or in terms of maybe what internal resources would they need?
Yeah, but it's really kind of it's finding, depending on how they're going to source the talent, kind of if it's using kind of a recruitment agency. And a lot of what we see, a lot of contractors, they go through recruitment agencies, and then who can place them in the hiring clients. So if that's the route to go, make sure they get a good kind of recruitment partner, and they'll look after all of the compliance. Really, kind of it's compliance, making sure that the contractor is compliant. Operating through a limited company is key. Making sure that the insurance, the taxes are up to date. Once that's done, then it's matching the role with the work, and kind of giving the feedback and making sure that everyone kind of is aligned in what the outcome is going to be.
Absolutely. I'm going to do a final call just for questions, folks. If you can pop them into the Q&A box, and we'll do a couple more. So I have a question here from Laura Ann in Deutsche Bank, and it's to the panel. Ireland can be immigration friendly, and employers can take the steps to support the international recruitment and provide the benefits and visa support, etc. Sometimes the barrier to entry is with the government and requirements of sending countries. My question is, to what extent do employers, companies, organisations have their power and appetite to influence and lobby governments to make barriers to entry and staying more user-friendly?
I'll go first. It definitely does happen, and that is part of the reason why we are seeing changes to the employment permit system, right? And there's a lot of we're going through a big overhaul of it. Like one thing, for example, as I mentioned, subcontractors, you can't get employment permits, which doesn't make sense that you can't get employment permits for subcontractors, and that is happening. I've had instances. I've had a lot of occasions of it, and it's really frustrating for clients because, it is a very common model, and that has come about from lobbying, from people sort of campaigning. Like another way you've actually seen the results of this is To get an employment permit, there's two lists. There's what's called the critical skills occupation lists, and that's where they're the jobs that there's a real shortage of. And then we have the ineligible list, which is the list where we have too many people, and if you're on that list, you won't get an employment permit. Those lists are ever changing because there's people sort of campaigning and lobbying and saying, you know, okay, there is a shortage of people in this area, you know, so it does evolve. So I certainly think it's worthwhile, and you know, yeah, okay, it takes a bit of time and effort, but you know, if there's a genuine reason for it and you can see a gap, then I would definitely encourage it.
Yeah, very helpful. Thanks, Blathnaid. Catherine, we have a question for you here. What kind of support and mentorship do apprentices receive throughout their journey, maybe from their employers, and does it contribute to their overall development and success?
Yeah, so they do. They get great support. So each apprentice has to be allocated as a supervisor and a mentor. Now, in a large insurer, is generally a different person. In the smaller brokerages, it could be the same person. So their supervisor is kind of their day-to-day or weekly kind of key contact, and if they have any issues or that. And we build into the academic program in first and second year, when they're doing the insurance theory modules, they do a work-based learning module. So they do case studies and tasks based on their insurance theory module they're studying that semester, and they submit that to their workplace supervisor, and they sign it off to their company standard. In the first semester, first year, those are weekly tasks, and that's really so that the new employee has a touch point every week, so that if they're afraid to ask questions or don't, you know, sometimes when you're just starting out in an organization, that they have that weekly touch point with their supervisor and they can talk things through. So it ensures kind of open communication, and it definitely creates a kind of a successful journey for the apprentices as they progress through. So right through for the 3 years in the workplace, they'll have a supervisor and mentor. The mentor's role is more kind of overview. It's like at the end of the semester, they sit down with them and they'd say, well, how do things go? What are we planning for next semester? How are you settling in? What's the longer term goal for you in the business? So that's the role of the mentor. And then they have a great relationship with our academic team. Our lecturers are very approachable, so they can, and any kind of academic issues, they're there as mentors to them. And then as students, they're registered as full-time students, so they've huge supports from our student services in ATU. So for example, if there's any issues with if a student had dyslexia or any learning support they needed, they can avail of all of those services. We have an excellent counselling service. We have an academic writing centre, a math support centre. So there's huge kind of academic supports there that they can avail of throughout the 3 years. So that, yeah, and it does make a difference. They're very they do lean on those supports. As I say, they're working, they're studying, they've got a life. It is tough, but with all of those supports between ATU and their employer, they tend to find that, you know, it's a big help to them.
Yeah, great. And there's another question here for you, Catherine. Sarah, I'd like to know, could you tell us more about the level 9 and when you think this might happen? Will it be the same as year kind of 1 to 3 of the apprenticeship programme? 1 day off work for online college? Is the entry level just successful completion of the level 8?
We're not there yet. I wish I had more details. It's what we want and where we want it to go. And being honest, we've wanted to go since really it was launched in 2016. It has been our aspiration, but it's a matter of getting approval and funding. But typically a level 8 into a level 9 would be an additional 1 year add-on, and the entry would be successful completion of the level 8, or if you're coming, depending on the entry requirements, if you're coming in with a different degree. But so yeah, we're still hoping it's very much an aim of the programme board that we would be able to offer the level 9, but we're not as far ahead as Sarah's kind of thinking there, I'm afraid, at the moment.
Yeah, okay, great, thanks. Look, I think we'll leave it there and wrap up. I think it's maybe all we've time for today, everyone. I want to thank each of the panel, Catherine, Blathnaid and David, for their time and for sharing their knowledge and insights with us today. Just to remind everyone that there will be a recording of the webinar available on our website very shortly, so feel free to download it and share it with your colleagues. I want to thank all of our attendees who joined us this morning as well, and for all the questions to the panel. Thanks very much, everyone. Take care and enjoy the day.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks very much. Thank you.